I inherited $13 million and rushed to tell my husband, only to be struck by a terrible accident that landed me in the hospital. To my surprise, he never came. When I called, he dismissed me, saying he had no time for a loser. Days later, he showed up with his new wife, but when she saw me, she froze and screamed, "Oh my God, she's my..." The $13 million check felt heavier than paper should as I stared at the numbers, my hands trembling against the desk. Attorney Michael Brennan watched me with patient eyes while I processed what seemed impossible. My estranged Aunt Catherine, who hadn't spoken to our family in 20 years, had left me everything. Not my father, her actual brother. Not my successful cousins with their medical practices and law firms. Me, Stephanie Walker, the family disappointment who transcribed medical reports from a cramped apartment while my husband Joshua complained about his dead-end accounting job. "Mrs. Walker, are you all right?" Brennan's voice pulled me back to his office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown. "I understand this must be overwhelming. I thought about this morning just 3 hours ago when I'd been scraping together quarters from the kitchen drawer to buy milk. Joshua had stormed out after another argument about money, slamming the door hard enough to knock our wedding photo off the wall. 7 years of marriage and we'd become strangers who shared bills we couldn't pay. Why me? I finally managed to ask. Catherine and I barely knew each other. Brennan adjusted his glasses, choosing his words carefully. Your aunt was very specific in her instructions. She said you would understand when the time was right. He slid another envelope across the desk. She left this for you as well. Inside was a single sheet of paper in Catherine's precise handwriting. Success requires sacrifice. You understand that better than you know. The money is a tool, not a solution. Use it wisely. The words triggered a memory from 6 months ago, one I'd hidden from everyone, especially Joshua. I'd been visiting Catherine in the hospice every week, reading medical journals to her while she lay dying. It started as obligation. A Facebook message from a cousin saying Catherine was alone, no visitors, refusing to reconcile with the family over some ancient business dispute I never understood. But those visits became something else entirely. Your pronunciation is atrocious, Catherine would snap when I stumbled over pharmaceutical terms. If you're going to read about enzyme inhibitors, at least respect the science enough to say it correctly. Yet she never sent me away. Week after week, I'd sit in that sterile room that smelled like disinfectant and impending death, reading about clinical trials and drug interactions while she corrected me with decreasing strength. During our last visit, when morphine had stolen most of her sharpness, she grabbed my wrist with surprising force. You're not like them, she'd whispered, her eyes suddenly clear. The others, they want comfort. You understand that success requires sacrifice. Remember that when the time comes. I never told Joshua about those visits. He would have mocked my sense of duty, asked what I expected to gain from visiting a dying woman who'd abandoned the family. The truth was, I went because I recognized something in Catherine. A woman who'd chosen career over convention, who'd built an empire in pharmaceuticals when women weren't welcome in boardrooms. She'd paid the price in loneliness, but she'd lived on her own terms. The estate is valued at $13 million, Brennan continued, pulling me back to the present. This includes her investment portfolio, 3 properties and various assets. There are no conditions, no stipulations. It's yours entirely. $13 million. The number felt fictional, like monopoly money. This morning I'd hidden our overdue electric bill under Joshua's laptop, knowing another fight about money would send him into one of his rages. Not violent, never that, but cold and cutting in ways that left invisible scars. He'd been different when we met in college. Ambitious but tender, frustrated but hopeful. 7 years of rejection letters from investment firms had curdled that hope into bitter entitlement. I need to tell my husband, I said, already reaching for my phone. Of course. Take all the time you need. We'll handle the paperwork over the next few days. Brennan stood, extending his hand. Congratulations, Mrs. Walker. Your life is about to change significantly. Walking out of the building into the afternoon drizzle, I felt disconnected from my body, floating above the street like I was watching someone else's life. The cramped apartment where Joshua and I had been slowly suffocating suddenly seemed like a different universe. On impulse, I stopped at the Mont Blanc store I'd passed 100 times but never entered. I'd like to see your silver pens, I told the saleswoman, who didn't even blink at my discount store clothes. The pen was $800. more than our monthly grocery budget. But as I held it, feeling its weight and balance, I imagined Joshua's face when I gave it to him. This would be our new beginning. No more fights about money, no more watching him shrink into bitterness. We could finally breathe. I called him from the car, my voice shaking with excitement I couldn't contain. Joshua, something incredible has happened. I'm coming home with news that changes everything. I'm in the middle of something, Stephanie. His voice was flat, distracted. I heard typing in the background. Can it wait? No, it really can't. Trust me, you'll want to hear this. A heavy sigh. Fine. But make it quick. I'm working on something important. Working on something important. Probably another elaborate business proposal that would go nowhere. Another scheme to escape the accounting firm he considered beneath him. I wanted to tell him right then. Scream it into the phone that our problems were over, that $13 million was sitting in an account with my name on it. But this deserved more than a phone call. This deserved to be perfect. The rain was picking up as I merged onto the expressway, the silver pen box on my passenger seat catching the gray afternoon light. I thought about Catherine's words. Success requires sacrifice. What had she sacrificed for her fortune? Family certainly. Love probably. Connection definitely. But what had I sacrificed? Nothing yet, I realized. The money had simply appeared, a gift from a woman I'd spent mere months getting to know. As I drove toward our apartment, toward Joshua, toward what I believed would be our new beginning, I couldn't shake the feeling that Catherine's real gift wasn't the money itself but something else. Something hidden in her cryptic message about sacrifice and understanding. The windshield wipers beat a rhythm against the growing storm, and I pressed harder on the accelerator, eager to share this miracle with the man I'd promised to love through better and worse. I never saw the delivery truck run the red light. The intersection of Route 47 and Maple Street had always been dangerous during storms. I'd complained about it to Joshua just last week, how the traffic light was hard to see through heavy rain. Now, as I approached it with windshield wipers struggling against the downpour, I could barely make out the green light ahead. The silver pen box slid across the dashboard as I tapped the brakes, and I reached to steady it, thinking about Joshua's expression when he opened it. That's when I saw the delivery truck. It emerged from the cross street like a wall of metal, the driver's face visible for one horrifying second through his windshield. Eyes wide, mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear. He was pumping his brakes, wheels locked, sliding through the red light on the rain-slicked pavement. My hands moved without thought, yanking the wheel right, but physics had already decided our fate. The impact came in stages. First the hood crumpled, an accordion of metal folding toward me. Then the airbag exploded against my face, white powder and fabric in pain. The pen box opened mid-flight, its contents spinning through space as my car rotated, passenger side crushing inward. My phone, showing Joshua's contact photo from my recent call, flew past my head. Through it all, one thought kept repeating. We never paid the electric bill. Such a strange thing to fixate on while glass shattered around me. Then darkness. Not like sleep but absolute absence. No dreams, no sensation, no passage of time. When I surfaced, it was to beeping machines and the chemical smell of industrial disinfectant. My throat felt lined with sandpaper. Every breath sent fire through my chest. I tried to speak but only managed a croak that brought footsteps. Easy now, don't try to talk yet. A nurse with kind eyes and graying hair adjusted something on my forestand. Her name tag read Rodriguez. You've been unconscious for 3 days. There was internal bleeding, emergency surgery. You're lucky to be alive. 3 days. My mind struggled to process this gap in existence. 3 days of what? Where was Joshua? I managed to gesture at the empty chairs beside my bed, the question clear without words. Rodriguez busied herself with my chart, not meeting my eyes. Let's focus on your recovery first. The doctor will explain everything when he makes rounds. But doctors came and went, explaining about shattered collarbones and surgical repairs, about the metal pins holding my shoulder together, about the traumatic brain injury that stole pieces of my memory. Nobody explained why my husband hadn't been sitting beside my bed when I woke up. By the 4th day I could speak in whispers. The first thing I asked for was my phone. Rodriguez brought it reluctantly, the screen cracked but functional. 17 missed calls, all from Patricia, my college roommate. None from Joshua. His last text was from before the accident. Stop calling. Busy. I dialed his number with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. Straight to voicemail. On the fifth try, I left a message, my voice barely recognizable. Joshua, I'm at St. Mary's Hospital. There was an accident. Please come. 2 more days of silence. I convinced myself of reasonable explanations. His phone was broken. He was searching other hospitals. The apartment building didn't give him my messages. Our landline. We didn't have a landline anymore, another casualty of our budget cuts. But surely someone had told him. Surely he was frantic searching for me. The morphine made everything feel distant and dreamlike, but it couldn't dull the growing dread. Rodriguez brought me ice chips and avoided my questions. Other nurses whispered in the hallway. On my 7th day conscious, 4th day of calling, Joshua finally answered. What? His voice was sharp, annoyed. Joshua, thank God. I'm in the hospital. There was an accident. I know about the accident, Stephanie. The ice in his tone cut through my medication fog. What do you want? The words didn't make sense. I must have misheard the head injury scrambling communication. What do I want? I'm in the hospital. I've been unconscious. I need you here. Pause. Then words that would replay in my mind for months. I don't have time for this, Stephanie. I don't have money or patience for a loser. Some of us have real futures to build. What? The monitor beside my bed began beeping faster. Joshua, I don't understand. I'm hurt. I'm alone. I'm your wife. You were my wife. Look, I have to go. Stop calling. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, certain I was hallucinating. The morphine, the head trauma, something was causing auditory distortions. I called back immediately. Number blocked. The beeping accelerated until Rodriguez rushed in, checking monitors, adjusting medications. My husband, I gasped between sobs I hadn't realized had started. Something's wrong. He's not himself. Rodriguez's face cycled through emotions. Anger, pity, resignation. She sat on the edge of my bed taking my hand. Honey, your friend Patricia has been trying to reach you. Maybe you should talk to her. Patricia arrived the next morning, her face a storm of barely contained rage. She hugged me carefully, mindful of my injuries, then pulled a chair close. I didn't want to tell you like this, but you need to know what he's done. Is he hurt? Did something happen to him? No, Steph. He's fine. More than fine, actually. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking with anger. He told everyone you died in the crash. Posted about it on social media the day after your accident. Held a memorial service in your apartment. The words bounced off my brain without sticking. That's impossible. Look. He showed me his Facebook page. There it was. A long post about losing his beloved wife, how suddenly life was precious, how he needed time to grieve. Hundreds of condolence comments below. Posted while I was fighting for my life in surgery. He changed the locks on your apartment, Patricia continued, her voice breaking. Moved someone in already. A woman named Savannah from that new investment firm job he started last month. She showed me another photo. Joshua at a restaurant, arm around a dark-haired woman who looked maybe 25. The caption, finding light in darkness with someone special. Posted 3 days ago while I was leaving him voicemails from my hospital bed. The woman's face made me pause. Something familiar about her features, the shape of her eyes, the way she tilted her head. She looked like photos of me from college before stress and disappointment carved lines around my mouth. How? Was all I managed to say. I don't know everything yet, Patricia admitted. But I went to your apartment building. The manager said Joshua had paperwork. Death certificate, will, power of attorney. All fake, obviously, but good enough to convince them. He's already tried accessing your bank accounts. My bank accounts. The $13 million. The inheritance Joshua knew nothing about. Or did he? The room started spinning, whether from medication or shock I couldn't tell. The monitor's beeping became a steady alarm as my heart rate spiked toward dangerous levels. Rodriguez was adjusting my medication when Michael Brennan arrived, his expression grave enough that she immediately excused herself. The attorney who had handed me $13 million just days ago now carried a tablet and a folder thick with documents, his jaw set with professional anger. Mrs. Walker, I apologize for not coming sooner, but I needed to gather evidence before approaching you with this. He pulled a chair close to my bed, his voice lowered despite the empty room. Your husband visited my office 6 hours after your accident. 6 hours. The hospital hadn't even finished your emergency surgery. My damaged brain struggled to process this timeline. How did he even know about the inheritance? That's what concerned me initially. He arrived with documents. A will, power of attorney, even what appeared to be a death certificate. All forgeries but sophisticated ones. He knew exactly what to ask for, mentioned the 13 million specifically. Brennan turned his tablet toward me, showing grainy security footage. Watch his behavior when my secretary told him we needed official documentation from the county. On the screen, Joshua paced the marble lobby I'd walked through days earlier. His body language radiated impatience, not grief. When the secretary explained the 30-day waiting period Catherine had mandated, he slammed his hand on the desk hard enough to make her flinch. The Joshua I knew avoided confrontation, but this man looked ready for war. He's called 17 times since then, Brennan continued. Each time with new documentation, new arguments. Yesterday he threatened legal action for deliberately withholding his wife's estate. He seems to have forgotten that dead wives don't have living husbands. Patricia arrived as Brennan was leaving, carrying my laptop in a tote bag. The building manager felt terrible when I explained the situation. Turns out Joshua told him you'd written a will leaving everything to him before the accident. Even showed him a document. She powered on the computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I need you to see something. The browser history made my stomach turn. 3 weeks before my accident, Joshua had searched Route 47 accident statistics. Then intersection collision fatality rates. Then, how long to declare someone dead. Page after page of searches about inheritance law, forged documents, accessing spouse's assets after death. The timestamps showed him researching late at night while I slept beside him, planning for my demise while I dreamed about our future. There's more, Patricia said quietly. She opened our joint bank account, the one we'd kept nearly empty for months. Small transfers had been leaving it since 3 months ago. $50 here, $75 there, all going to an account in the Cayman Islands. The dates aligned perfectly with when Catherine's cancer diagnosis became terminal. He knew about the inheritance before you did, Steph. He's been preparing. My mind reeled. How could he have known? I'd hidden my visits to Catherine, never mentioned the possibility of inheritance. Then I remembered the life insurance paperwork he'd insisted we update 3 months ago, how he'd asked detailed questions about my family's assets. Had he hired someone to investigate? Show me Savannah, I managed to say, though her name felt like acid on my tongue. Patricia pulled up social media profiles across multiple platforms. Savannah Mills, 26, financial analyst at Brennan Investments. Not the same firm as my attorney, thankfully. Her LinkedIn showed she'd attended a financial technology conference 3 months ago where Joshua had presented about alternative investment strategies for modern markets. The same week Catherine entered hospice care. Photos from the conference showed them at the same networking events, cocktail hours, panel discussions. In one image, they stood close enough that their shoulders touched, both holding champagne glasses, her laugh captured mid-moment while he gazed at her with an intensity one recognized. He'd looked at me that way once back when I was young and full of potential he could exploit. Look at her face, Patricia said, zooming in on a recent photo. Tell me you don't see it. I saw it immediately. The same green eyes I faced in the mirror each morning, the arch of eyebrows I'd inherited from my mother, even the way she tilted her head when smiling. It was like looking at myself from 10 years ago before exhaustion and disappointment had marked my features. It's disturbing, Patricia continued. Like he went shopping for a younger version of you. But there's something else. She pulled up Savannah's Facebook page, scrolling back years. She's been posting about searching for her birth mother since she turned 18. Look at this status from last year. The post read, "Another dead end in my adoption search. Sometimes I wonder if my birth mother even remembers I exist. All I have is this one photo and a dream of finding where I came from." The attached image made my world stop. A faded hospital photograph. An exhausted teenage girl holding a newborn. The girl's face was partially turned away, but I knew that profile. I knew that hospital gown. I knew that baby. Patricia watched my face change. "Steph, is there something you need to tell me?" The memory crashed over me like the truck had. Violent, unexpected, transforming everything. 1998. I was 18, pregnant by a boy who vanished the moment I told him. My parents, prominent in their church community, gave me two choices: abortion or adoption. They arranged everything with clinical efficiency, sending me to stay with a distant relative until the birth. One photo, one moment holding her, then she was gone. I'd packed that pain so deep I sometimes forgot it existed. I looked at the laptop screen, at Savannah's hopeful posts about finding her birth mother, and felt the horrifying pieces click together. Joshua hadn't just found a younger woman who looked like me. He'd found my daughter. Patricia, my voice came out strangled. I need you to check something. When did Joshua and Savannah start appearing in photos together? She scrolled through timestamps. First photo is from that conference 3 months ago. But wait. She pulled up Joshua's LinkedIn. He started following her 2 weeks before the conference. And look at his search history from around then. The searches were surgical in their precision. Adoption records, Minneapolis 1998, birth mother search services, financial conference attendee list, Savannah Mills background, and most chilling, inheritance rights, biological children adopted. He'd hunted her down, found my daughter, seduced her, and was using her as a weapon in his scheme. The monitor beside my bed started its familiar alarm as my heart rate spiked, but this time I didn't care. Rage was burning through the medication fog, clearing my mind for the first time since the accident. That's when I noticed the final document Patricia had pulled up, a note in Catherine's handwriting, tucked into the estate paperwork Brennan had left. I'd missed it in my initial shock, but now the words stood out like a beacon. Some secrets are meant to surface. The truth about 1998 will find its way. I've watched over her just as I've watched over you. Be ready. Catherine had known. Somehow my estranged aunt had known about the baby I'd given up, had perhaps even been keeping tabs on her. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was a catalyst, designed to expose everything hidden in the shadows of my life. The physical therapist's hands guided my leg into position, and I bit down on a scream that wanted to tear from my throat. Catherine's words had become my mantra during these sessions. Success requires sacrifice. Each movement was agony, the pins in my shoulder grinding against bone, but I forced myself through the exercises with newfound purpose. My daughter was out there being manipulated by the man I'd married. Every step I managed was a step closer to saving her. You're pushing too hard, Rodriguez warned, watching my face contort with effort as I gripped the parallel bars. Recovery takes time. I don't have time. I managed 3 more steps before my leg buckled. Rodriguez caught me, easing me back into the wheelchair with practiced efficiency. He's coming here. I need to be ready. Rodriguez studied me for a long moment, then pulled up a chair. I've seen a lot of patients in my 20 years here. The ones who heal fastest aren't the ones who push through pain. They're the ones who learn to work with it. She demonstrated a breathing technique, slow and controlled. Pain makes us reactive. But if you can control your breathing, you control your responses. Try it. I practiced while she counted, inhaling for 4, holding for 4, exhaling for 4. The rage that had been burning since Catherine's note settled into something colder, more focused. Rodriguez was right. I couldn't meet Joshua's deception with raw emotion. I needed precision. Patricia arrived that afternoon with a collection of electronics and a grim expression. Brennan's on his way. We need to prepare the room. She pulled out my phone, downloading a recording application hidden behind what looked like a calculator icon. Touch the equals sign 3 times to start recording. The screen can be off and it'll still capture everything. Is that legal? Brennan says single-party consent applies in this state. You're protecting yourself from fraud and potential harm. She positioned my phone on the bedside table, angled to capture the room. He's also bringing security footage from his office building, bank records, everything we need if this goes to court. Michael Brennan arrived carrying a briefcase and wearing the expression of someone preparing for war. He surveyed the room with strategic precision, ultimately choosing a spot behind the door where he wouldn't be immediately visible. Mrs. Walker, we need to discuss possibilities. Your husband has shown escalating behavior. He might bring lawyers, try to intimidate you, even claim you're mentally incompetent. What if he brings Savannah? The thought of facing my daughter, seeing those familiar eyes while she stood beside the man manipulating her, made my chest tight. That's actually ideal for our purposes, Brennan said carefully. Her presence would provide evidence of his deception. But it will be emotionally difficult for you. We spent the next hour rehearsing scenarios. Patricia played Joshua, adopting his dismissive tone while I practiced remaining calm. Brennan coached me through legal terminology, warning signs of escalation, when to call for security. But nothing could prepare me for seeing their photos. Patricia had printed recent images from social media. Joshua at gallery openings, business dinners, conferences. The transformation was stunning. Gone was the bitter man who'd raged about his dead-end job. This version wore tailored suits, designer watches, carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd already won. In every photo, Savannah stood beside him, her hand on his arm, gazing at him with open adoration. Look at his eyes, Patricia pointed to a close-up from a week ago. He's not even pretending to grieve. He was right. The Joshua in these photos radiated satisfaction, not sorrow. He'd shed his old life, shed me, like an uncomfortable coat. The wedding ring was already gone from his finger. We need to force his hand, I said, an idea forming. Patricia, can you send him a message from your phone? She hesitated. He knows we're friends. Won't he be suspicious? Not if we word it right. I thought carefully, composing something that would trigger his paranoia. Tell him you know about the inheritance. That I'm awake and remember everything. That he needs to fix this before I talk to police. Patricia typed the message with trembling fingers. We waited in tense silence, the hospital sounds, beeping monitors, distant conversations, footsteps in hallways, seeming amplified. Then her phone buzzed. We'll handle it today. Delete this message. Patricia showed me the screen. The "we" means he's bringing her. Brennan stood checking his watch. They'll probably come during evening visiting hours when there's less staff attention. I'll position myself once we know they're in the building. He placed a business card on my table. Security's number is programmed. Don't hesitate to use it. After they left, I sat alone with my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back looked like a stranger. Hollow cheeks, bruises still yellowing around my eyes, hair limp and lifeless. I'd lost at least 15 pounds since the accident, my collarbones sharp beneath hospital gown fabric. But my eyes had changed most. The soft acceptance that had lived there for 7 years was gone, replaced by something harder. I thought about the 18-year-old who'd given up a baby, too young and scared to fight for what she wanted. The 28-year-old who'd married Joshua, believing love meant sacrifice without reciprocation. The 35-year-old who'd hidden bills and accepted coldness, thinking that was the price of partnership. Each version of me had accepted less than she deserved, had bent until breaking seemed inevitable. Patricia had left lipstick in my drawer, a deep red I'd never have chosen for myself. I applied it carefully, watching my face transform. Not prettier but more defined. More present. I arranged myself in bed, positioning pillows to support my damaged shoulder while appearing naturally relaxed. The hospital gown was deliberately loose, making me look frilier than I felt. Let Joshua see weakness. Let him think he'd already won. I practiced my breathing exercises for counts in, for counts held, for counts out. The rage was still there but contained now, compressed into something useful. My phone sat innocently on the bedside table, calculator app ready. The afternoon sun slanted through blinds, casting bars of light across the white blanket. By 5 o'clock, my nerves were singing with anticipation. Every footstep in the hallway made my pulse spike. Rodriguez checked on me one last time, squeezing my hand with unspoken support. Patricia texted updates from the lobby. Brennan confirmed his position. The stage was set. At 5:47, I heard his voice in the hallway, that familiar tone now edged with impatience. Room 314. Yes, we're family. My finger found the calculator app, 3 quick taps on the equals sign. Recording. The doorknob turned with deliberate slowness, and Joshua entered my hospital room with the measured confidence of someone walking onto a stage he owned. The transformation from the man I'd kissed goodbye just over a week ago was complete. An Armani suit I'd never seen, shoes that probably cost more than our monthly rent, a watch that caught the afternoon light with deliberate ostentation. He moved differently, each gesture calculated for maximum effect, carrying a leather briefcase that looked fresh from the boutique. Stephanie, he said, his voice layered with concern that didn't reach his eyes. You're looking better than I expected. The casual cruelty of that statement, expected, hung between us. He approached my bed with measured steps, setting his briefcase on the visitor's chair with practiced precision. I kept my breathing steady for counts in for held, remembering Rodriguez's training while my phone silently recorded from the bedside table. The doctors called me about your condition, he continued, pulling documents from his briefcase. They're concerned about your cognitive state after such severe head trauma. Confusion, memory gaps, difficulty processing complex information, all perfectly normal for your injuries. I let my eyes drift slightly, playing into his narrative. Joshua? You came. Of course I came. He arranged papers on my bed tray, each movement deliberate. We need to discuss your care going forward. The medical bills alone will be staggering, and there are decisions about your assets that can't wait. Assets. Not our assets, not even my assets in the caring sense. Your assets like items in an inventory. He produced an expensive pen, not silver like the one I'd bought him but gold-plated, another prop in his performance. This is a simple power of attorney, he explained, his voice taking on a patronizing tone I'd never heard before. It allows me to handle the complex financial matters while you focus on recovery. The doctors agree it's best to avoid stressing you with these details. The doctors. I let confusion color my voice. Which doctors? A flicker of annoyance crossed his features before he smoothed it away. Dr. Martinez from neurology. You probably don't remember the consultation. Head injuries affect memory formation. He leaned closer and I smelled expensive cologne, not the drugstore brand he'd worn for 7 years. Just sign here and I'll take care of everything. I reached for the pen with a trembling hand, then let it slip from my fingers. It clattered to the floor, rolling under the bed. Joshua's jaw tightened, but he maintained his solicitous expression, bending to retrieve it. In that moment I saw the calculation in his movements. Every gesture designed to appear caring while maintaining control. There are other documents too, he continued, producing more papers. Insurance forms, hospital administration, property transfers to simplify your estate. All standard procedure for someone in your condition. My condition, I repeated slowly. You keep saying that. Severe traumatic brain injury, multiple surgeries, extended unconsciousness. He recited my injuries like reading a grocery list. The prognosis is uncertain. We need to be practical about long-term care possibilities. The door opened again and my entire body tensed. Savannah entered hesitantly, designer handbag clutched against her body like armor. She stayed near the doorway at first, partially hidden in shadow, but I could see enough. The familiar green eyes, the way she touched her throat nervously, a gesture I recognized from my own repertoire of anxiety tells. This is Savannah, Joshua said smoothly. She's been helping me navigate the legal complexities. She works in financial services. Savannah stepped forward into the harsh hospital lighting, and the breath left my lungs. 26 years old, Patricia had said, but seeing her in person made time collapse. She had my mother's cheekbones, my father's stubborn chin, and eyes that matched mine so perfectly it felt like looking into a mirror that reflected the past. She stared at me with growing confusion, her face cycling through emotions. Nervousness, recognition, shock. Her hand rose unconsciously to her throat again, fingers finding a small pendant I couldn't quite see. The afternoon sun streaming through the blinds caught her face at an angle that made the resemblance undeniable. Hello, I managed, my voice barely a whisper. Savannah didn't respond. She stood frozen, handbag sliding down her shoulder as her arms went slack. Her mouth opened slightly, closed, opened again. Behind her carefully applied makeup, her face had gone pale. Savannah, the witnessed signature, Joshua prompted, impatience creeping into his tone. We discussed this. But Savannah wasn't listening. She moved closer to my bed with the inevitable pull of gravity, her eyes never leaving my face. Her hand fumbled with her bag, searching for something with increasing desperation. When she pulled out the photograph, worn soft at the edges, creased from years of handling, my heart stopped. There I was at 18, exhausted and terrified in a hospital gown not unlike the one I wore now, holding a baby whose face was turned toward the camera. The photo I thought had been destroyed with all the other evidence of that hidden year. My parents had promised everything would be erased, the slate wiped clean. But someone had saved this image, had given it to the child I'd held for exactly 43 minutes before they took her away. "Oh my God," Savannah whispered, her voice cracking. "She's my mother." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Joshua's carefully constructed performance shattered instantly. His face contorted with fury as he lunged toward Savannah, grabbing her arm hard enough to make her gasp. "Shut up," he hissed. "Stick to the plan." But Savannah stood transfixed, tears streaming down her face as she held out the photograph with trembling hands. "I've carried this my whole life. It's the only thing that came with me to my adoptive parents. The only link to my birth mother. I've been searching for you since I turned 18. I reached for the photograph, my own hands shaking. The moment our fingers touched, something electric passed between us. 17 years of separation, grief, and longing condensed into a single point of contact. The scar," Savannah breathed, pointing to a tiny mark on the baby's shoulder in the photo. "I still have it. From the emergency C-section. They told me my birth mother almost died delivering me. I remembered that night. The pain that came too fast, the blood that wouldn't stop, the terrified faces of nurses as they rushed me to surgery. I'd been alone except for a social worker who held my hand and promised the baby would be safe, would be loved, would have everything I couldn't give her." Joshua yanked Savannah backward, breaking our contact. "This is ridiculous." She's confused, probably coached by someone trying to manipulate the situation. But the truth was already unraveling, visible in Savannah's trembling recognition. In the photograph that captured a moment I'd never forgotten. In the matching eyes that held 17 years of unspoken questions. "Let go of her," I said, my voice carrying an authority I didn't know I possessed. Joshua's grip on Savannah's arm tightened instead, his knuckles white against her skin. She winced but didn't pull away, still staring at me with those achingly familiar eyes. "You planned this," Savannah said to Joshua, her voice gaining strength with each word. "The conference in March. You didn't accidentally bump into me at the networking session. You knew exactly who I was." Joshua's face cycled through calculations, trying to salvage his crumbling scheme. "She's confused, Stephanie. This girl is obviously disturbed, creating fantasies about." "You showed me her medical records," Savannah interrupted, turning fully toward him now. "You said you'd hired a private investigator to help me find my birth mother. You had documents, photos of her from high school, even knew about the complications during delivery." My breath caught. The complications. Severe hemorrhaging that nearly killed me, the emergency surgery that saved my life but guaranteed I'd never carry another child. Details only someone with access to sealed medical records would know. "You told me she'd been searching for me too," Savannah continued, tears flowing freely now. "That she was wealthy but fragile, that she needed someone to help manage her affairs. You said marrying you would make us a family, that she'd be so happy to see me settled with someone she trusted." Each revelation felt like another layer of skin being peeled away. Joshua had crafted an elaborate fantasy, feeding Savannah exactly what she'd desperate to hear while positioning himself as the bridge to the mother she'd always wanted. "When did he propose?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. 2 weeks ago. The day after he said you'd agreed to add me to your will." Savannah's face crumpled with shame. "I should have questioned it, but I wanted so badly to believe." "The night of my accident," I said, looking directly at Joshua, "you were removing boxes from our apartment. Patricia found the security footage." Joshua's expression shifted, the mask finally slipping completely. "You don't understand what you're talking about. 3 hours after the crash, while I was in emergency surgery, you were loading my possessions into a rental van." My voice stayed steady despite the rage building in my chest. "The building's cameras caught everything. Time-stamped. License plate visible." Michael Brennan stepped out from behind the door, his presence commanding immediate attention. Joshua spun around, genuinely startled. "Mr. Walker," Brennan said formally. "I'm Michael Brennan, Mrs. Walker's attorney. I've been documenting this conversation, along with your attempts to access her inheritance through fraudulent means." "This is entrapment," Joshua snarled, but his confidence was evaporating. "This is evidence collection," Brennan corrected. He pulled out his tablet, swiping to display documents. "Would you like to explain why you researched the intersection where your wife's accident occurred 3 weeks before it happened? Or why you've been transferring money to offshore accounts for the past 3 months?" Savannah gasped, stepping away from Joshua. "You researched the accident location?" Traffic patterns, collision statistics, fatality rates. Brennan continued, reading from the screen. Quite thorough research for someone who claims to be a grieving widower. The room felt smaller suddenly, charged with electricity. Joshua's carefully styled hair had begun to wilt, sweat beading at his temples. His expensive suit no longer looked like armor but a costume that didn't quite fit. The baby clothes, I said suddenly, the memory surfacing with startling clarity. You found my memory box when we moved in January. That's when this started. Joshua's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. A tiny yellow hat, a hospital bracelet with baby girl Walker printed on it, and one photograph. I looked at Savannah. He must have used that information to track you down. Adoption records are sealed, but with enough money and the right connections. He hired someone named Marcus, Savannah whispered. Said he was a specialist in reunion services. I met with him twice. He had so much information about you, about your family, your life. The violation of it, Joshua pawing through my most private pain, weaponizing the grief I'd carried for 17 years, made my damaged ribs ache with the effort of containing my fury. You know what the saddest part is? I said to Joshua. If you'd just asked about the box, I would have told you. I would have shared that pain with you because I thought marriages meant carrying each other's burdens. Spare me the martyrdom, Joshua snapped. You hid $13 million from me. I inherited it after you'd already decided I was worth more dead than alive, I shot back. The transfers to offshore accounts started 3 months ago. Catherine wasn't even dead yet, but you were already stealing from us. Brennan cleared his throat. Speaking of which, Mr. Walker, would you care to explain this? He showed another document on his tablet. A marriage certificate dated 5 days after my accident. Bigamy is a felony in this state, as is fraud, attempted theft of an estate, and filing false death certificates. The blood drained from Joshua's face as the full weight of his exposure hit him. He looked between Brennan, Savannah, and me, calculating odds that had already turned against him. I want a lawyer, he said flatly. Excellent choice, Brennan replied, pulling out his phone. Security is already on their way up. Detective Morrison from the Financial Crimes Unit would also like a word. 2 hospital security officers appeared in the doorway, their presence filling the remaining space. Joshua straightened his tie, a reflexive gesture of control when everything had spiraled beyond his grasp. 7 years, I said quietly, and everyone turned to look at me. 7 years of marriage and you never knew me at all. I knew enough, Joshua replied, his voice bitter. I knew you'd never amount to anything without me pushing you. Transcribing medical reports in that pathetic apartment, accepting whatever crumbs life threw at you. She was supporting your dreams, Savannah said suddenly, her voice fierce. She worked that job to pay the bills while you pursued your art, your business ideas, your endless schemes. Joshua laughed, ugly and sharp. Supporting me? He was holding me back. Do you know what it's like to have that kind of potential trapped by someone else's mediocrity? The words should have hurt, but they didn't. Because finally, after 7 years, I was seeing the real Joshua. Not the struggling artist I'd fallen in love with, not the bitter husband I'd tried to appease, but the calculating predator who'd seen me as nothing more than an obstacle to overcome. Mrs. Walker, one of the security officers said gently, we need to escort Mr. Walker out now. As they moved toward him, Joshua made one last attempt. Stephanie, think about what you're doing. We can work this out. I looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not my husband but a stranger wearing an expensive suit bought with money he'd stolen while planning my funeral. You never knew me, I repeated, each word deliberate and final. The security officers moved toward Joshua with practiced efficiency, one pulling handcuffs from his belt while the other positioned himself to prevent any sudden movements. Joshua's entire body went rigid, his face flushing deep red as the reality of his situation crystallized. This is a mistake, he said, voice rising with each word. I'm her husband. I have rights. You can't just. Sir, please turn around and place your hands behind your back, the officer interrupted calmly. Do you have any idea who I am? I work at Brennan Investments. I have lawyers who will. Mr. Walker, you're under arrest for fraud, filing false documents, bigamy, and attempted theft, Detective Morrison announced as she entered the room, her badge visible on her belt. She was younger than I expected, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Joshua's composure shattered completely. Gone was the polished executive in the expensive suit. In his place stood a desperate man watching his carefully constructed world collapse. He twisted toward Savannah, his face contorted with rage. "You stupid girl, you ruined everything," he spat. "We had a plan. You were supposed to. I was supposed to help you steal from my mother," Savannah finished quietly. She stood straighter despite the tears on her face, meeting his fury with unexpected strength. "You used my deepest wish against me. You knew how badly I wanted to find her, and you turned that into a weapon." The officers began leading Joshua toward the door, but he managed one last look back at me. "You'll regret this, Stephanie. You have no idea what you're destroying." "The only thing destroyed here is the illusion I lived with for 7 years," I replied steadily. As they escorted him out, his threats echoing down the hospital corridor, the room felt suddenly vast and quiet. Savannah stood frozen near the window, arms wrapped around herself as if holding her pieces together. Brennan excused himself to coordinate with Detective Morrison, leaving us alone for the first time as mother and daughter who actually knew their connection. "I'm so sorry," Savannah whispered. "If I hadn't been so desperate to find you, if I had questioned his story." "Stop." I reached out my hand, and after a moment's hesitation she took it. "You're not responsible for his deception. He targeted you because he knew exactly what buttons to push." A knock interrupted us. Patricia peered around the door. "There are 2 people here who say they're Savannah's parents. Should I?" "Yes," Savannah said quickly, then looked at me with sudden anxiety. "Is that okay? They drove down from Minneapolis when I told them everything." Mark and Diana Lauron entered with the careful movements of people entering a minefield. They were exactly what I had hoped for all those years ago. Kind faces, comfortable clothes, the worn wedding rings of people who had built a life together. Mark was tall and slightly stooped, with professor's glasses and paint stains on his shirt. Diana was shorter, rounder, with laugh lines that suggested a life filled with joy. "You must be Stephanie," Diana said softly. "We've heard so much about you over the years." "All from a 17-year-old's imagination," I managed, my voice catching. "No," Mark said firmly. "From a young woman who never stopped wondering about the person who loved her enough to give her a better life." Those words broke something inside me. 17 years of suppressed grief came pouring out in ugly, gasping sobs that made my injured ribs scream in protest. Diana moved without hesitation, gathering me into her arms with the practiced comfort of someone who had soothed countless tears. "We always told her," Diana murmured against my hair, "that her birth mother must have loved her fiercely to make such a sacrifice. That adoption isn't about not wanting a child, it's about wanting more for them than you can give." Through my tears I saw Savannah crying too, held in Mark's embrace. We were a strange tableau, for people bound together by a decision made by a terrified teenager 17 years ago. When the tears finally subsided, Detective Morrison returned with troubling news. "We've uncovered some additional evidence I think you should know about. 3 days before your accident, someone filled a prescription for sedatives in your name at a pharmacy across town. The signature isn't yours." My blood ran cold. Sedatives. Powerful ones. The kind that, mixed with alcohol or even certain foods, could cause confusion, delayed reactions, impaired judgment. Morrison's expression was grim. "Your neighbors mentioned you seemed unusually tired in the days before the accident. One said you were stumbling when you got your mail, seemed confused about what day it was." The implications washed over me. Joshua hadn't caused the accident, but had he been preparing for something else? Making me vulnerable, easier to control, or potentially, I couldn't finish the thought. "Combined with everything else, it adds attempted poisoning to his charges," Morrison continued. "We're looking at 12 to 15 years minimum, possibly more if we can prove intent to cause serious harm." After Morrison left to process more evidence, the 5 of us sat in strange but comfortable silence. Patricia had returned, taking her post as protective friend. The Lawrence had pulled chairs close to Savannah, who kept glancing at me as if I might disappear. "Tell me about your childhood," I said suddenly. "I want to know everything. First words, favorite foods, bad teenage decisions, all of it." Savannah laughed, a sound that made my heart contract with its familiarity. My first word was, no, which Mom says explains a lot about my personality. She was stubborn from day one, Diana confirmed with obvious affection. Refused to eat peas, refused to wear pink, refused to give up on finding you even when the adoption agency said it was impossible. We talked for hours as the hospital darkened around us. Mark told stories about Savannah's science fair disasters. Diana shared photos from awkward middle school years. Savannah admitted to sneaking out for a concert at 15 and getting grounded for a month. Each story was a gift, pieces of the life I had wondered about filled in with love and laughter. I became a financial analyst, Savannah said eventually, because I thought if I understood systems and records I could find you. I specialized in tracking hidden assets, following paper trails. Ironic that Joshua used that skill set as part of his con. What will you do now? I asked. She glanced at her parents, then back at me. I don't know. Everything about my life in the city feels tainted now. The job, the apartment, even my morning coffee shop where Joshua first approached me, it's all connected to his lies. You could stay here for a while, I offered carefully. Not as any kind of obligation, just, if you want time to figure things out. The hope that bloomed on her face made every moment of pain worth it. We had been brought together through betrayal and manipulation, but perhaps something real could grow from such poisoned soil. 6 months had transformed everything except the scar tissue. My body bore permanent reminders of the accident. A shoulder that ached before storms, a slight limp when tired, but the deeper changes were invisible. I sat in the courthouse gallery watching Joshua receive his sentence, feeling nothing resembling victory or closure. 12 years for fraud, conspiracy, attempted theft, and poisoning charges they could never quite prove but couldn't dismiss. He stood in his orange jumpsuit, diminished and ordinary, no longer the man who had consumed 7 years of my life. Savannah sat beside me, her hand resting near mine on the wooden bench, not quite touching but close enough to feel the warmth. We had learned to navigate space between us with careful intention, building connection without forcing intimacy that 17 years of separation had stolen. When the judge read the verdict, Joshua turned to look at us one final time. His eyes held no remorse, only the cold calculation of someone tallying losses in a game he still believed he should have won. Outside the courthouse, autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves and distant rain. I pulled the last photograph of our wedding from my purse, the one I had kept meaning to throw away but somehow never did. 7 years younger, standing beside Joshua in a borrowed dress, believing love meant accepting less than I deserved. The wind caught the pieces as I tore it methodically, scattering them like confetti for a celebration no one attended. Do you regret the marriage? Savannah asked, watching the fragments disappear into the city streets. I regret not seeing who he really was, I replied. But without that marriage, without his deception, we might never have found each other. Sometimes the worst roads lead to the best destinations. We walked to our cars in comfortable silence. Over the past months, we had developed our own rhythm. Coffee together every Tuesday morning, dinner on Sundays, texts throughout the week that ranged from profound to mundane. The $13 million had made many things possible, but the most valuable investment had been in time together, learning to be mother and daughter without the weight of expectation. The foundation we established occupied the 3rd floor of a renovated building downtown. Second chances, provided support for women facing crisis pregnancies and facilitated adoption reunions with proper counseling and resources. Savannah had left her finance career to coordinate the reunion program, using her skills in tracking records and understanding systems to help other families find each other through legal, ethical channels. We have 3 new reunion cases this week, she told me as we drove to the office. One mother has been searching for 40 years. I had returned to biomedical research but with a different focus, studying the genetic and epigenetic factors in adoption and separation, how biology and environment shaped identity. The work felt like redemption, turning personal pain into potential healing for others. My new laboratory was modest but sufficient, funded by the inheritance that had nearly destroyed us but ultimately rebuilt us stronger. Our apartments overlooked Lake Michigan, side by side but not connected, maintaining the boundaries necessary for healthy relationship building. Most mornings I could see Savannah on her balcony with coffee, often on the phone with the Lawrence, who had embraced our strange extended family with remarkable grace. Diana called me weekly, sharing recipes and childhood stories I had missed. Mark sent photos from his biology classroom, where he now used our story, carefully anonymized, to teach about nature versus nurture. Thanksgiving arrived with unexpected snow, transforming Minneapolis into a postcard. The Loron house smelled of turkey and cinnamon, filled with cousins and neighbors and the controlled chaos of family gathering. I stood in the doorway holding a pie I had attempted, Diana would later kindly call it rustic, watching Savannah help her adoptive mother, her real mother in every way that mattered, prepare stuffing while arguing about seasoning proportions. "Stephanie, stop hovering and come help," Diana called, waving me into the kitchen with flour-dusted hands. Family doesn't stand in doorways. The word family still caught me off guard, but I was learning to accept it. During dinner, Mark raised his glass for a toast, his professor's voice carrying over the cheerful noise. To families of choice and chance, to roads that led us here, and to futures we're building together. Later, as Savannah showed me embarrassing photos from her teenage years, braces, unfortunate hair experiments, failed attempts at rebellion, I realized this was what I had unknowingly sacrificed her for all those years ago. Not wealth or success, but this warmth, this belonging, these people who loved her completely. The decision at 18 had been right, even if it took 17 years and terrible circumstances to prove it. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, on the anniversary of the accident, Savannah and I drove to the intersection where everything changed. The city had installed a small memorial garden after a pedestrian safety campaign, though they didn't know it marked my personal transformation point. Early morning frost made everything crystalline, beautiful in its fragility. I had brought the fragments of the silver pen, pieces recovered from the accident scene that Patricia had somehow saved. That gift intended to celebrate a false future with Joshua now felt like archaeological evidence of a different person's life. Savannah carried a small flowering crabapple sapling, chosen for its resilience and ability to bloom after the harshest winters. We dug the hole together in silence, the physical work grounding us in the present moment. I placed the pen fragments at the bottom, covering them with dark soil. The tree settled into place with surprising ease, as if it had always belonged there. Savannah watered it carefully while I packed earth around its base, ensuring stability for the seasons ahead. "Sometimes," I told her as we stood back to observe our work, "destruction is just creation wearing a disguise. That accident destroyed the life I knew, but it created space for the life I actually needed." Savannah linked her arm through mine, a gesture that had become natural over the months. "Do you think we would have found each other without Joshua's scheme?" I considered the question, watching morning traffic navigate the intersection where my old life had ended. Catherine seemed to think so. Her note suggested truth always finds its way. But I'm grateful we don't have to wonder. The sun broke through clouds as we walked back to the car, casting long shadows behind us. The flowering tree stood small but steadfast in its new home, roots already beginning their invisible work of finding purchase, seeking water, establishing foundations that would support decades of growth. Next spring it would bloom for the first time, pink and white flowers emerging from branches that winter couldn't break. The $13 million remained largely untouched except for the foundation and our living expenses. Money, I had learned, was simply potential energy. It could create or destroy depending on the hands that wielded it. Joshua had seen it as power to be stolen. Savannah and I saw it as responsibility to be shared. The difference between those perspectives contained everything that mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, a photo from her morning run past the memorial garden. The tree stood centered in the frame, frost sparkling on its slim branches, looking like it was dressed in diamonds. "Beautiful addition to the neighborhood," she had written. "Strong roots make all the difference." I showed Savannah the image as we drove toward our separate but connected futures. She smiled, that familiar expression that reminded me of myself but had become entirely her own. We had been brought together by deception but held together by choice, building something real from the wreckage of everything false. The intersection behind us grew smaller in the mirror, but the tree would remain, growing stronger through seasons, marking the spot where one story ended and a better one began. If this story of betrayal and redemption kept you riveted, hit that like button right now. My most powerful moment was when Savannah recognized me as her mother, shattering Joshua's entire scheme in seconds. What moment touched your heart the most? Share it in the comments below. Don't miss more incredible true stories of survival and triumph. subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.